Luděk Pachman was born in Belopod Bezdezem, is that how it's pronounced? Czechoslovakia. He was born May 11th, 1924. He became an IM in 1950 and a Grandmaster in 1954. He was a 7-time Czechoslovakian chess champion, 7 times between 46 and 66. And then he won the West German Chess Championship in 1978. He won 3 zonal tournaments, competed in 6 interzonals, including this one. He never did become a candidate. How did he end up becoming the West German champion? Well, he had been formerly an ardent communist, but he came to oppose the communist regime after the Czech uprising in 1968. And he was imprisoned several times, which he describes, by the way, in graphic detail in his 1975 biography entitled Checkmate in Prague. He drew international attention to his situation by intentionally jumping headfirst from his prison bed, and that jump caused permanent head and spinal injury. Well, rather than allowing him to be a thorn in their side as a political martyr, the communist authorities allowed him to emigrate in 1972 to West Germany, where he settled and where he continued his chess career and hence became the German champion, the West German champion at the time. Pachman passed away March 6th, 2003 at the age of 78. He starts the game with d4, and we get knight f6, c4, g6, King's Indian defense, knight c3, bishop g7, pawn e4, pawn d6, pawn f3. This is your anti-Grunfeld variation. Pawn e5, king's knight to e2 right here. By the way, this is Samish's variation, named for Carl Samish. King's knight to e2, kingside castles, bishop g5, pawn c6, queen d2, and here queen a5 was played, not the most common line. More frequent is queen's knight to d7. That line continues with d5, c takes d5, c takes d5, a6. Yeah, and there are several lines that can be played from here. g4, knight g3, pawn h4, even knight c1 can be played. So that's all the further we'll take that. Let's go back. Bobby with queen a5. Pawn d5 here from Luděk Pachman. Pawn takes pawn. I don't know if it would be better to develop your knight. In these lines, the knight often comes temporarily and pivots on a6 and then lands on c7. It's a move that I've played on numbers of occasions from both sides of the board. On knight takes pawn, you'll get queen takes queen check and bishop takes queen. Well, here pawn takes pawn, and he does play knight a6 after all. And here knight c1 is played. Bishop d7, bishop e2 was played here. Not sure why that gets a question mark. Knight c5, kingside castles, king's rook to c8, knight d3 here, knight a4, knight takes knight, queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, bishop takes knight, king's rook to c1, knight e8, bishop e3, now pawn a6, pawn b3, bishop d7, knight b2. Really not much to say about these moves. Sorry for the lack of commentary in these last 2 games, but there's not much to say. In both games, both players played nearly impeccably. Bishop f6 was played here, knight c4, threatening the fork. So finally a comment. Bishop d8 prevents that hit. Pawn g4, pawn f5, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes the pawn, and bishop takes the pawn. And that was that. They drew the game right there. The only other thing that could have been played than pawn takes pawn here would be bishop d3. supporting this pawn. But if he pawn takes pawn, you're not taking it with your bishop, you're taking it with your pawn. But it was pawn takes pawn and bishop takes pawn, and again, a fairly early draw in this 17th round of the tournament. Certainly, fatigue was setting in. I mean, how many games did they play total? It was 21 in all. That's a lot of chess games. So I'm sure they were glad, some of them, to get some quick draws and to recuperate. What's amazing is how cleanly these last two draws were. Even though they were short, they were very clean. Hardly anything could be said about them. And yeah, not only exhausting, but, the 90-move marathon against Sherwin obviously took more than one session. I wonder if they had 2 adjournments in that game with as many moves as it was. From here, you like f4? Well, the problem with f4 is I'm going to lift my rook and lift and slide over here. I don't really care about this hit. f4, rook c7, and if you take my pawn, you're asking for trouble here. King's exposed. You can't come to f2 because you get picked again. And here you cannot go to f1 or you're self-mated. There's checkmate. You'd have to go to f3, I guess. But yeah, you're asking for trouble. I don't think f4 might be the best plan. Of course, this pawn wants to attack the knight, so maybe a4 would be more prudent. Viral says don't take the pawn then. Play f4, and after rook c7, just don't take the pawn. Play what? King f1? Or do what? Move the bishop to guard the king? You mean bishop f3? Play bishop f3. What if I play e4? Then just bishop g2, I guess. Yeah, okay, I see your point. But now I've got an open line here. That could be problematic. Now I can even make a battery here. Now I'm threatening b5. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of things they could have played to keep the game going. Obviously, a draw in 24 moves, they both needed a break and played a fast draw and just agreed to it. But I prefer black here for sure.